What do you think the smallest country in the world is? Well, after a quick Google search, it turns out that this tiny place in Europe called the Vatican City was actually the smallest country in the entire world. And to give you an idea for how tiny this place is, it's 250 times smaller than Disney World, the same size as the largest mall in America, and because of the secrets kept within its walls, it is considered to be the most powerful country on Earth.
And today, that's exactly where we're gonna be going, but there's one slight problem.
And that's because I live in Canada. So that means in order to get to the Vatican City, I'd have to fly all the way over to Europe. So obviously I booked the cheapest flight to Rome, but this is where the problem got even worse.
So my flight to Italy leaves in 10 hours, and I was double checking the entry requirements, and I ended up missing something pretty big. Apparently to get into Europe, you need 3 doses for COVID, but for Canada and the US, we only need 2. But according to this, they also accept a negative rapid test, so somehow we have to figure out how to get one in the next few hours here.
And that's exactly what I did by calling and looking up every possible pharmacy nearby, and somehow I was lucky enough to get an appointment. And after them almost poking my brain out, I was able to get my negative test, but at this point I needed to get to the airport as fast as I could. But this wasn't the end of my problems, because when I got to the gate to board my flight, I almost had a heart attack.
Thank you. Where is your final destination? Rome.
Rome, yeah.
Okay, do you have your vaccine certificate?
Yeah, it's in my backpack.
And after being brought to a completely separate area, they checked everything out and finally let me on the plane. And 9 hours later, after the longest red-eye flight I have ever been on, I landed in Italy.
So this is the Vatican. And this fence right here is the border between Italy on the right and Vatican City on the left. So now crossing this line, we've officially left Italy and we are in Vatican City. And now while we're here, I've created a list of some of the craziest things that we need to see before we're allowed to leave. And trust me, these things are insane.
Starting off easy, we need to go into the Vatican itself. And next we have to film one of the most famous paintings in human existence. But the only way to do this is by avoiding security guards, since this painting happens to be placed in the most secure room where nobody is allowed to film. And finally, the last 2 things I need to do is find the world's only Latin ATM machine and find the secret Vatican railway.
And now here are some other crazy things that you guys should probably know about this place.
First off, only 825 people live in the Vatican City, but despite this, they have the highest crime rate out of any country in the world. On top of that, the Vatican prints its own money, has its own flag and anthem, they own the world's shortest railway tracks, and they have their own private Swiss military. And the craziest thing is that because of all the gold and artifacts that they keep in secret, they are considered to be the 18th wealthiest nation on the entire planet. And at this point, you're probably asking yourself why the smallest country in the world is so powerful, but this is because the Vatican is home to the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. And this means the Vatican is one of the most secure places on Earth, and today I'm gonna be filming some things I probably shouldn't.
So now let's go inside because there is a lot that we need to do.
And just when I thought things were going smooth, as I was going through security, this is where I ran into a very big problem. Because Vatican City is also considered to be one of the most historical and religious places on the entire planet, they don't want some YouTuber recording videos here. And this meant that security ended up taking my camera mic and tripod away, meaning I'm gonna need to narrate everything. But this wasn't gonna stop me because I flew all the way across the world, and this was even more of a reason to film this video. So now that I was finally past security, the first place I went to was the St. Peter's Basilica, which was easily the most beautiful and famous building in the Vatican. And once I was inside, words honestly couldn't describe how insane this place was. Everywhere I looked was the most stunning art I had ever seen in my entire life. And being inside, there was definitely an aura and a feeling that I have never felt before. But the craziest thing that I couldn't stop thinking about was what secrets were hidden behind closed doors and in areas that nobody was allowed to go. So I decided it was now time to look for the next task on our list, which was to find the famous creation of Adam painting. Now, in order to do this, I needed to leave the current building I was in and walk around to a completely separate side entrance where I'd be able to access another part of the city. And this was the main area where more of the artwork would be found. And once I was inside, I realized that this was going to be a lot harder than I had originally thought. And this was because this section of the Vatican was designed to be a museum, and it was heavily guarded. People were only allowed to go in one direction through the maze of thousands of different artifacts, and every single room had at least 2 security guards in it. And this was easily the scariest part, because at any point, one of the guards could ask to see my footage, and if there was something on there that they didn't approve of, I would need to delete it, give them the card, or at the very worst, they'd bring me somewhere to be interrogated before kicking me out, so I needed to keep a low profile. But eventually, after navigating my way through various different corridors filled with some of the most beautiful art I had had ever seen, I ended up at the Sistine Chapel. And inside, nobody is allowed to film or take photos because this is one of the most important locations in all of Vatican City. Now, to make sure I wasn't going to disrespect anyone's culture or religion, I made sure to Google why filming and photos inside were banned. And it turns out it was because back in the 1980s, when they were restoring some of the artwork, they gave the photography rights to a company for 3 years. But afterwards, they decided to keep the ban in place over fears that camera flashes would damage the artwork. But since I'm recording videos with no flash, I gave myself permission to record, but this was going to be difficult. Inside the room, there were easily about 10 different security guards walking around making sure that nobody had their cameras out. And the only way I was able to film was by putting my camera on my hip, and I could not see anything that I was recording. Every few moments, a guard would walk right by me, and at one point when I was filming, I almost blew my cover because of the record sound on my camera. But in the end, I was able to capture a shot of me and the famous painting, but this is where things got even more intense. Now that I had the footage and appreciated the pure beauty of everything inside, I needed to leave this part of the museum. This was because at any point, any of the guards could ask to go through my footage, but luckily I was able to make my way through, and I can now say that we've completed the second challenge. So now up to this point, we have successfully gone inside the Vatican, and we have also filmed one of the world's most famous paintings despite all of the security. And now remember earlier when I told you guys how the Vatican City is also home to the world's only Latin ATM machine and the world's smallest railway? Well, it's now finally time to find those last two things. Now, I'll be honest, I have no idea where either of them were gonna be, and even though this was the world's smallest country, it was pretty much a giant maze. The only thing I could think of was to ask a few employees where the train station would be, and according to them, it was on the other side of the city. And when I went to ask them where this Latin ATM was, they were extremely confused, so hopefully we end up finding it. Anyways, after making my way to the other side of the city, I ended up going into some of the other buildings trying to find this Latin ATM, and when I did eventually find an ATM, it wasn't the one I was looking for, so I kept going. So now that I was closer to the railway and the train station, I decided to pull up a map, and this is when I realized that it was behind some of those badass Swiss guards I was telling you about earlier. And obviously, I tried to go by them so I could get to the train station, but they wouldn't let me pass. Naturally, after being rejected, I decided to Google how to actually get there. But apparently, the only way to get there is by buying a specific tour of the Vatican Garden. And the only issue was that it wasn't running until 3 days later. So obviously, I decided to Google where this Latin ATM actually was. And it turns out it was also behind one of these gated entrances. And unless I wanted to end up in an Italian prison, there was no chance I was going to be allowed in. So this left me with one option. Since I had a flight leaving Rome the next day, we are going to return to the Vatican City and make sure we end up finding the last two locations. And to make this even better, I'm going to be bringing my own piece of artwork, and we are going to be putting it inside for the world to see.